Welcome back. In the first part of What to Analyze, I laid out a conceptual framework for a comprehensive list of what to analyze. Today, in the second part of What to Analyze, I'll develop a comprehensive list of specific items that are candidates for analysis work. My purpose of doing this is to help you to establish credibility with your customer. As a super analyst, you cannot be just a drifter. You have to conceive, you have to plan, you have to lead the questioning of analysis. Now, as a necessary condition, and you need to know what are the threads of analysis that you may need to pick up in a particular task domain. Before we start, let me first clarify one question. Now, you may ask me, say, can I use your list as a job order for a particular project? My answer to that is no and yes. Okay, so let me use a simple analogy to shed some light on this. Suppose you're going to a restaurant. Now, obviously, they're going to serve you with a menu. And also, it is obvious you're not going to order every item on the menu every time that you go to that restaurant. Okay, in this case, I am developing a menu. Okay, so that implies the following. Number one, my domain of discussion is the entire company for all possible projects. Number two, it is highly unlikely that you will touch all items in the list for every single project. Number three, some of the items you may not ever touch. Number four, and you alone probably cannot do every single item that's on the list. It always takes a teamwork. But as a super analyst, you are the only one who is responsible for organize, divide, and conquer. Okay? Integrate the findings from different threads of analysis will be your responsibility, not the junior or even senior analysts. Now, before we start, I need to make another distinction between the structural knowledge and domain knowledge. Let me use an analogy again. If you go into the library system, the library classification system is like the structural knowledge. Now, it must be able to handle all possible books. So it's like a label system for bookshelves. Domain knowledge, on the other hand, is like for a specific library, what books you will buy. You probably will not buy every single book under the library classification system. So it is like, for your needs, what are the actual books you're going to buy and put on the bookshelf under some of the proper labels. Okay? Obviously, I can only speak to structural knowledge. I don't know any specific domain knowledge of your project yet. Okay? But as a super analyst, having a strong, robust structural knowledge will help you to speed up the acquisition of domain knowledge. Having a good structural knowledge base is also a must for an analyst to see the connections among different parts in your domain knowledge. Okay? When you get lost, you return to the structural knowledge framework where you're going to reorient yourself. Okay? For the super analyst, a robust structural knowledge is just a must-have. Now, we just explained why, for professional growth reasons, you need to have a robust structural knowledge base. But practically, for your career growth out there, you also need to look at the fact that IT applications today is penetrating an increasingly wider range of businesses. Demands and opportunities shift fast. Now, you can no longer just dwell in the comfort zone of the same industry sector, even the same application, year after year for repeating the type of analysis that you always do. Okay, so, and a super analyst must be versatile. And to be versatile means you need to have a robust structural knowledge base. As you can imagine, there's a huge pile of potential items for analysis. Okay, I'm not going to generate a laundry list of all the items. So, how are we going to approach this? How do we organize this? Now, one term, top-down. We will develop the analysis agenda list in a top-down fashion. Please note, along the top-down list of potential analysis items, not every single analysis item will generate a tangible deliverable to your customer. Some of the items are merely for analysts themselves to construct in a context in which to conceive and interpret analysis findings. Just like we shouldn't zoom into the tree without paying any attention to the forest, analysis is a sense-making activity. Analysts should first construct a conceptual framework in which they can interpret specific analysis findings that generates specific deliverables. Okay, without further delay, let me put together the list for you.
First, now let me say a few words about the knowledge structure of a super analyst. I have a rule of thumb for myself. I need to build a knowledge structure that is 2 levels above and below the current layer of analysis. You can probably get by with 1 level above and below, but 2 is a much safer choice. Now, this is important for 2 reasons. First, as a super analyst, you need to interpret your findings in context. Your knowledge structure is the context. Second, more importantly, a primary role played by a super analyst is to coordinate people who play different roles in a company. And the very need of inter-role coordination will only happen when these people are required to work on a higher level mission than their own job responsibilities. And the coordinator certainly must understand the higher level mission. That said, now let me first lay out a high level roadmap for developing my list of analysis agendas. Now, I will progressively work at several layers of analysis agenda shown here. At the business layer, a super analyst certainly needs to understand the business strategy, the market strategy, your customer base, etc. But more concretely, a super analyst first needs to understand the SOA. SOA stands for Service-Oriented Architecture, which is a fairly popular term these days, which specifies at the organization level how do different subsystems work together to deliver value to its outside world. Let's take a look at one example. Now, in this service-oriented architecture, a company is more or less being viewed as a value chain. The receiver of the value is obviously your customer, and the customer through various channels to interact with certain parts of the company. And to make this interaction happen, the company must have an operation that's built up behind it. Or generally, I would say it has a work platform. This work platform has several layers. And first, you need to have the business process. How are you going to do your work? And these business processes are generally supported by a portfolio of IT applications. And underlying that, and a more fundamental part, or more stable part, is the enterprise data model. And these things interact with each other and work together through the enterprise service bus to support the overall operation of the company to deliver value to the customer. Now, whatever analysis you're conducting, and it must be interpreted in this, it's kind of like a puzzle, right? And you need to know your piece. How does your piece fit into this puzzle. The second item at the business layer is about how people work. And we need to look at two items here. First is how individuals work. Second is how individuals work together. And the first one, how individuals work, is defined generally by SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. Sometimes these job responsibilities and scripts for performing a job. And second, one person may provide input for the next person to carry on the work, and that's a business process flow. And here we probably draw a lot of diagrams. For example, the so-called nickname the swim lane chart is in a business process flow chart. In general, there are a lot of items that will capture what business wants to say to IT. For example, we're familiar with the use cases or user stories, and we're familiar with BRD or FRD, and these two are just at different levels of design spec. And user requirements may change over time, and we need to have a tracking of the changes to be able to trace back and say why certain things changed, not only what changes or what's the current requirements. Outer manual boundary. Okay, this is an important item that many times are missing from an analysis. And outer manual boundary basically is specifying what should be done by human or what should be done by machine, and how to pass on the control back and forth from human to machine and vice versa. Another one that oftentimes I would say didn't receive enough attention is business rule. Now, business rules specifies who, triggered by what condition, need to perform what task or make what choices among what options based on what criteria. Now, these are extremely important for the design of application control structure. Last but not the least, and in recent years this is becoming more and more important, is about the access right control. Who can see what? Who can do what? To what documents or what data or what configuration, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes a tough challenge for an analyst is to pin down the granularity of access right definition. Is it at the table level? Is it at the column level? Is it at the row level? Or is it at the cell level? Okay. And the last item that I want to say a few words about is about the conventions and standard of work versus exceptions that we encounter in daily work. And we all know that the business processes, the analysis and the documentation generally focus on the standard and conventional way of conducting an operation. Okay, and systems and data design is usually based on the standard and requirements. Now, these requirements many times merely mean what the user or stakeholders think how things should work. But exceptions cannot be ignored. Otherwise, when the rubber meets the road, and people will get stuck. And sometimes it takes a long time to figure out a way for a system designed based on convention and to be able to solve an exception. And that sometimes leads to work stoppage. And so, it is important to understand these possible exceptions. And they usually points to system flexibility and accommodation of exceptions. Let's take a break.